Today's manufacturing belt looks something like this, but many still think of it as the Rust Belt, the failed region of the United States. This is the story on how the manufacturing belt went through a massive transformation over just the last 2 centuries. From its rise during the Industrial Revolution to its decline and finally to its revival today, going from almost forgotten to once again playing a key role in the economy. In the 1840s, people were using charcoal to smelt iron, which was really inefficient. The real start of the manufacturing belt happened when they started using coke instead of charcoal, and built smelters closer to coal mines to save on transportation. At the same time, a lot of new railroads were being built, like the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, chartered in 1827 and finished in 1830, and the Erie Canal finished in 1825. This new infrastructure was key for what would become the manufacturing belt. As you can see on this map, the manufacturing belt had a lot of coal, and still does. But back then, during the industrial era, many coal mines and smelters were concentrated in this part of the northeastern United States. I don't consider the start to be as early as the charcoal era. While the northeastern US had plenty of trees, it wasn't what made the region unique. Back in the 1840s, charcoal was being replaced by coal, which was used in blast furnaces to make better iron and steel, a huge improvement over charcoal. This shift led to a big rise in iron production that could easily be exported. And what happens when a place starts to thrive? People start moving there to live and work, but that wasn't nearly as big as what was coming next. In 1856, an Englishman named Henry Bessemer came up with the Bessemer process, which allowed for the mass production of steel from molten pig iron. While this might not sound super exciting at first, it was a game-changing innovation that cut costs by over 50%, transforming the steel industry forever. The first Bessemer steel in the US was produced at a plant in Michigan in 1864. This new method extended quickly, and the largest steel mill yet, the Edgar Thomson Steel Works, was built in 1875 near Pittsburgh. From then on, big steel mills were built, especially around Chicago, as well as in other Great Lakes cities like Cleveland and Detroit, to handle the ore from Lake Superior. By the late 19th century, the Great Lakes region had become a major center of steel production, which powered the growth of railroad construction and new industries that relied on cheap steel. The next big thing came in 1908, when Henry Ford started producing the first car on an assembly line, the Ford T4. This was a huge success and started mass car production around the world. It also helped the manufacturing belt expand beyond just steel, as more industries popped up to use all the iron being made. Detroit quickly became known as the Motor City, and the region became the center of automobile manufacturing, employing hundreds of thousands of workers in car factories and related industries. World War I and II further accelerated growth. The demand for steel and other manufactured goods skyrocketed. In 1945, the US produced 67% of the world's pig iron. For comparison, in 2014, this number had dropped to only 2.4%. By the 1950s, the manufacturing belt was at its peak. The region produced more than half of the US manufacturing output and was home to some of the biggest companies in the world, like General Motors, US Steel, and Ford. Cities were booming and life seemed perfect for many people. Families moved to suburbs, bought cars, and enjoyed a rising standard of living. But hold on for a moment, things weren't going to stay like this forever, right? Despite all this growth and prosperity, there were underlying problems that would soon bring the manufacturing belt to a sudden standstill. The decline of the manufacturing belt started slowly but became more evident in the 1970s. Several factors contributed to this decline, turning the once thriving region into what many called the Rust Belt. One of the biggest challenges was increased competition from other countries. Manufacturers from abroad, especially Japan and Germany, were producing goods like cars and electronics more efficiently and at lower costs. US industries, many of which had not modernized their factories, simply could not keep up. At the same time, automation was starting to take over the manufacturing sector. While automation helped companies become more efficient, it also meant that fewer workers were needed. Many people lost their jobs as factories modernized and the region's key jobs disappeared. Adding to the problem was the shift in the US economy from making things to focusing on other sectors. Instead of producing goods, the economy started focusing more on jobs in finance, technology, healthcare, and education. Industries that were often based in different parts of the country. Factories that had once operated at full capacity began to shut down. Whole neighborhoods were left, abandoned as people moved away in search for better opportunities. Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, and cities like Youngstown, Ohio, which had thrived during the boom years, saw their populations shrink dramatically. Buildings fell apart, factories rusted, and the whole place started to look abandoned and hopeless. The impact on people's life was huge. Families that had once enjoyed a stable middle-class lifestyle found themselves struggling. The decline of the manufacturing world wasn't just an economic shift. It was a social and cultural one too. Communities that had grown up around factories now felt lost. But the region wasn't lost forever. Even with all these struggles, there were small signs of hope. Some companies and communities didn't give up and started trying new things to adapt, slowly setting the stage for the region's comeback. The story of the Rust Belt doesn't end good, but neither does bad. Over the last few decades, the region has started to bounce back. The cities and towns that were once left behind are finding new ways to adapt and grow again. One big reason for this comeback is that the whole manufacturing belt has diversified. It used to be all about steel and heavy industry, but now it's about healthcare, education, and tech. Universities like Harvard have projects throughout the region, which have helped attract big companies like Boeing and many startups. This shift has given the entire region a new identity. The car industry across the region is making a comeback too. It is adapting to new trends, focusing on electric vehicles and new technology, which has brought fresh energy to the entire manufacturing belt. Companies like General Motors are investing in electric cars, creating jobs and helping to bring back people to these cities. Government programs have also played a part. Federal and state initiatives have provided funding to clean up old factory sites, improve infrastructure, and bring in new businesses. These programs have helped make these areas more attractive for new industries and workers. The revival hasn't been easy, and there are still challenges. Not every city has recovered in the same way, and many of the new jobs require different skills compared to old factory jobs. But there's hope. The move towards green energy and sustainability presents new opportunities. Wind turbines, solar panels, and electric vehicles all need to be made somewhere, and the Rust Belt's existing infrastructure makes it a good place for these industries. The manufacturing belt, or Rust Belt, it's you to decide how to call it, will probably never be what it once was, but it is finding a new way forward. The region is learning to adapt, to innovate, to build a future that looks different, but still connects to its industrial past. The story of the Rust Belt is no longer just about decline. It's also about revival and reinvention.